What's up, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle here with my start and sit analysis for the tight end position in Week 12. And boy, does it take a lot of analysis for tight ends this year because the position continues to be a disaster. However, Week 11 was much better. We had a lot of guys produce in Week 11, which was great to see. That makes lives on all of us, including myself, a lot easier when we're trying to decide who to play. As always, let's take a look at the start and sit percentages from last week. 69% last week. Sorry, my inner child took over there for a second. 69% just missed that 70% mark last week. But hey, ended up hitting 75% on wide receivers. I recorded that video prior to Monday Night Football ending, and after it was done, was actually at 75%. So good week at wide receiver. Good week at quarterback and running back for Jake. Pretty good week at tight end. Could have been a little bit better, but we'll get back on track. Let's get back over that 70% mark this week, and let's jump right into it. And we'll start with our Turkey Day games. Houston at Detroit on Thanksgiving, the first game on the slate for the Houston Texans. Darren Fells will be a sit, but Jordan Akins will be a start for me this week. No Randall Cobb moving forward, at least for the next few weeks, it looks like. And Jordan Akins has played 64% of his snaps in the slot this season. That is sixth most among tight ends. So when Akins is out on the field, they're really utilizing him in the slot quite a bit. And with no Randall Cobb now, that percentage could go up for Akins. Heck, they could put Fells and Akins onto the field together a little bit more. Based on the way they've utilized Kiki Qt out of the slot and how they felt about him, I would actually see Jordan Akins getting a little bit more work there. And that's why I am going to list him as a start this week, because if he does play in the slot, he could be a big target for Deshaun Watson on that Thursday matchup. For the Lions, we're going to roll with TJ Hockenson. His 7 targets last week led the team. That was great to see. But is he a little bit hampered right now? He had that foot injury pop up on the injury report at the end of the week. Ended up playing a couple of weeks ago. Didn't look that great. The guy just, he doesn't look like he's 100%, which is right in line for what the rest of this team looks like. Now, I don't expect Kenny Golladay back this week either. He was limited in practice so far. Another short week. I just don't know if they end up rushing him out there this week. And if he's not rushed out there, TJ Hockenson has a lot more volume to take on. The afternoon game on Thanksgiving, Washington and Dallas. And for Washington, Logan Thomas will be a start for me again this week. Now, the guy's been a roller coaster of production all season long. Very up and down. However, the reason we're going to list him as a start and probably continue to do so from now on is because he's getting enough volume. The targets going his way is more than enough for him to hit on any given day. When you play him, there's a 50% chance you're going to be really disappointed. There's a 50% chance that you're going to be really excited with most players. Unfortunately, it's just been really up and down. There's really no telling. In good matchups, he's performed bad. In bad matchups, he's performed well. So there's really no telling what it is. With Alex Smith, though, I do expect him to continue to target Logan Thomas at a pace that is above and beyond what any of the other wide receivers outside of Terry McLaurin is seeing. Again, last week, only 1 reception, but he did have 5 targets. So more than likely, I'll keep him a little bit lower in my rankings moving forward, but we are going to continue to list him as a sit because he does have that time. He does kind of have that boom or bust value. He could hit at any moment. For Dalton Schultz in Dallas, I'm going to go ahead and list him as a start as well. We just really can't limit our options right now. That's part of the problem with this position, is that we don't have a whole lot of options to even utilize. So in this matchup going up against Washington, where Washington has been pretty good against opposing wide receivers, we could see Dalton Schultz get a few extra targets and maybe a touchdown. I think if they have him locked down on the outside in the red zone, Dalton Schultz could score a touchdown. And again, that right there, as long as he gets that and even a little bit of volume afterwards, more than enough to make him a start. The news out of Baltimore, just not looking great. A lot of apparent positive tests for the Baltimore Ravens. What are we going to see this week? Are they going to be able to get this game in? I'm not 100% sure as of this recording, so make sure that you stay up to date on it because that's really going to affect it. With this being a Thursday night game, having 2 other Thursday night games and needing to make a decision on players could really affect you when you move forward with that. So let's jump into the tight end portion of it, though. For Baltimore, Mark Andrews is going to be a start for us. The last couple of weeks with Mark Andrews, we've seen a lot more volume pushed his way, which is really what we need to see from him. Now, again, with the way the passing game is right now, it is going to be hit or miss. That's just the way it's going to be. But 2 weeks ago against New England, he saw 9 targets. And last week against Tennessee, he saw 7 targets. That's what we got to get back to seeing. And hopefully, that's what Harbaugh and the coaching staff have said here in Baltimore. We got to get Andrews rolling again. Now, he does have a thigh injury. Questionable. I still expect him to play. I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue. But again, too, we have to see what happens the rest of the week with this team. Got a touchdown last week. Again, finally, after a small little drought there of 5 games without a touchdown. Hopefully this continues, and this is definitely a situation where when he sees more than enough volume, he is a start. And we're back to seeing that volume over the last couple of weeks. For Pittsburgh, Eric Ebron is going to be a start for me. If it's a better matchup, maybe I'm okay with starting him. Like last week, just barely hit those 10 points because he scored that touchdown. Now, he did end up having more catches than Juju, which I wasn't really expecting, but last week was a much better matchup for him than what this week is against Baltimore as well. Jacksonville is not the type of team that is going to, stop tight ends too often. Baltimore can do a much better job of that. And that's why this week, Eric Ebron will be a sit for me. But again, this is the only team in the NFL that has 4 players with 4 or more receiving touchdowns. You could potentially start this guy with the 3 wide receivers moving forward. You just have to keep in mind that he's going to be boom or bust, and he's going to probably bust more often than not. Mike Gesicki for the Dolphins is the only one in this matchup that I'm really interested in this week. And the one thing that we got to keep an eye on with him is that he is actually seeing his yards per reception boop, 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 climb up again. And that's what we need from Mike Gesicki. I mean, this is a guy that's not your prototypical tight end. He's not a blocker. He's not, the bigger guy that you're going to throw over the middle of the field and he's going to knock people over. Mike Gesicki is an athlete. He's more of a wide receiver than he is a tight end. So for him to be fantasy viable, we got to get some bigger plays out of him. And we're finally seeing that again, which is exactly what we need, okay? That's where Mike Gesicki is going to make his living, is with those big plays. So the hope is that we continue to see that for Mike Gesicki moving forward. So when he's utilizing those big plays and he's making those big plays, he's giving us more upside every single week. The targets have been there, and that big play upside hasn't been there that we've seen so far this season. Hopefully, we're getting back to the volume and the upside. Those things come together. Mike Gesicki's a top 10 tight end. He may have had a touchdown last week, but shout out to one of our own here in Headliner Nation. Isaiah, Dan Arnold still is not a thing. You know what I mean. On the other side, though, does New England have anybody that's a thing? No, they don't. So this is a matchup where we're not really worrying about anybody. Now, I've only got Ryan Izzo listed right now for New England because it's really been him and then guys rotating in and out and everything like that. Hopefully at some point in time, Devin Asiasi becomes the lead tight end there and becomes a guy that's fantasy viable. I don't know when that could end up happening, but, hopefully it's next year, maybe the year after that. But as of right now, they don't really have any weapons that you can utilize at the tight end position. Carolina and Minnesota is a matchup of 2 offenses that, continue to waste the talents of their tight end. Ian Thomas, Kyle Rudolph, and Irv Smith Jr. Now, Ian Thomas is not a guy that a whole lot of people, are ever excited about. And I get it. He's never really been a thing, but This is not an offense that, again, utilizes the tight end position, which is really unfortunate. Would love for Ian Thomas to be somewhere where they could utilize his athleticism and really get him in some mismatch opportunities. And for Minnesota, Kyle Rudolph, a couple of weeks when Irv Smith Jr. was out, he looked like he was a guy that, was getting a little bit more targets. But when both of these guys are healthy, it's really a no-go. And one of the biggest travesties of the season will be Irv Smith Jr. Why Minnesota has failed to utilize him more than what they have is a complete mystery to me. And really, honestly, if they did, I think this offense would be even better than what it is right now. Austin Hooper was literally this close to making it a pretty good day for him and being a hit. That touchdown pass, though, just right through the fingers, just barely missed. Austin Hooper was wide open in the end zone. Baker Mayfield kind of had to lob it up to get it over the defender, though, that was coming after him, and just missed Austin Hooper, or he would have had a really good day last week. Hopefully this week against Jacksonville is another good day for Austin Hooper, though. I mean, again, Jacksonville team that gave up, quite a bit of points to Eric Ebron last week. The same thing could be in store for Austin Hooper this week, and that's why I will roll with him as a start for the position. For Tennessee and Indianapolis, I'm keeping an eye on Jonnu Smith this week. We really need to. Left last week's game early with an injury. How is he going to be heading into this game with Indianapolis? That's going to be the question. As of right now, I'm going to list him as a start. But if he's limited in any capacity, we may need to be very careful with him and probably try to go a different direction. Now, is the different direction going to be Anthony Firkser? No, it is not. I'm not going to go that direction with him. However, we'll need to look for somebody else that can fill in and take over those tight end duties. So it's going to depend on what you're looking for, what's available on your roster. Do you have another tight end? Make sure you keep this in mind. The good news is, though, again, he plays, later on in the week. So we can make those decisions a little bit later on in the week. But we do have some tight ends going earlier in the week that could be a fill-in option. So just keep that in mind. Try to read up on some of the reports. He does have touchdowns in 2 of his last 3 games. He has 6 targets in back-to-back games. So it definitely looks like that maybe he's starting to get healthier or they're trying to utilize him more. Whatever it may be, hopefully we continue on that path with Jonnu Smith. Now, after that, for Indianapolis, the problem with Indianapolis continues to be the same thing. All 3 of these guys get the same amount of snaps. They all get the same amount of targets. They're splitting touchdowns. If you were to add the stats from Jack Doyle, Mo Alley-Cox, and Trey Burton together, you've got a top 5 tight end. That's how good that they've been combined, but you can't do that. However, maybe that is something. Maybe platforms out there will let you draft, team tight ends and not individual tight ends. Hey, might be a way to solve our issues at the tight end position. If that were the case, Indianapolis, they would be a banger of a tight end position. We'd be taking them on a weekly basis. In weeks 7 through 9, the Giants titillated us with Evan Engram. 29 targets over those 3 weeks. And all of a sudden we get to week 10 and he completely disappeared again. Giants, you can't do that. He's your best receiving option on the team. Nothing against Slayton, and I'm a huge Slayton fan. Nothing against Shepard. Shepard's a great player. Evan Engram is the one guy on that team that can provide you the best mismatch on a weekly basis right now, and you're not doing anything with him. The Giants are just as bad as some of the other teams. I have no idea what they think they're doing there. They have got to get Evan Engram more involved, and hopefully coming off the bye last week, it will allow him the opportunity to do that. Hopefully they've game planned for it. For the Cincinnati Bengals, Drew Sample is going to be a sit, but I just want to bring this up to everyone to keep an eye on it. So with Finley being the starting quarterback now, Joe Burrow obviously out with his injury, maybe Drew Sample is a guy down the road over the next few weeks that starts to get a little bit more volume as kind of that safety net for Finley. Maybe him and the wide receivers just don't have that type of connection, but maybe Drew Sample is the guy that we need to be looking at. So keep it in mind over the next couple of weeks. Keep an eye on these games. Keep an eye on the box scores, the stats, everything you need to. I'll keep you updated as well. Drew Sample might be a guy that we need to keep a closer eye on. In my wide receiver video, I already listed this matchup between the Bills and the Chargers as being one that could completely blow the over off the door. They're 4th and 5th in the league in passing yards right now. And even though there's nobody from Buffalo I'll consider, we're going back to Hunter Henry again, baby. Back-to-back weeks with the touchdown. He's up to the tight end 7 on the season, and he's the tight end 2 over the last 2 weeks. Justin Herbert and him starting to get that connection. I told you, Headliner Nation. I told you. The volume for Hunter Henry has always been there. He just hasn't been scoring. And back-to-back good weeks, look what it has done for him. He's back to being a guy that we should be putting out there. Now, that's not to say that things couldn't change on a dime. That's not to say that Hunter Henry could become an awful start for us this week. But when matchups on the outside get a little bit more tough against Buffalo, they tend to give up some bigger plays to the tight ends. And Hunter Henry is the definition of a big play tight end right now. Anytime you talk about Las Vegas, you start Darren Waller. Darren balls to the Waller, always a start. I did add Jason Witten back to the show this week. I haven't had him in here, but I want to put him in as a sit just to show him how upset I am with him stealing a touchdown last week from Darren Waller. That should have been Waller's touchdown, not Witten's. Anyway, we know we're starting Darren Waller, right? The question is Hayden Hurst. Now, if Julio Jones is out, yeah, Hayden Hurst is going to be a start for me, and Hayden Hurst is going to be a little bit higher up in my rankings. He's probably going to be at least a top 6 tight end for me. If Julio were to play for some reason, then Hayden Hurst is a guy, the performance is just... It's been hit or miss, but it's been far more miss. And I think part of the problem with Hayden Hurst is people had such high expectations coming into the year for him, and I was not one of them. I was the guy that said, hey, we're staying away from Hayden Hurst this year. You know, that's one of the good calls that I've made this year so far. Hayden Hurst has not been a guy that we've been able to rely on. He's had some decent games, but he hasn't really been that good. And last week, 2 targets, only 2 targets last week. That just doesn't sound right to me. So this week, right now, he's a start because I don't think Julio Jones plays. If Julio Jones ends up playing, part of me says we're going to go back to Hayden Hurst and move him back to a sit. But we'll have to talk about that a little bit later in the week. San Francisco and the Rams. And for the 49ers, they're going to have their hands full at the wide receiver position with the Rams. So looking at the tight ends, this could be a week for Jordan Reed to really have one of those, you know, those Jordan Reed-esque performances that we're so accustomed to over the course of his career. Back on the field, was obviously the number 1 2 weeks ago at the tight end position for them. 6 targets, caught 5 of those. Expect to see some of the same this week. He's definitely going to be a start for me and definitely could be a great guy for you to pick up. If he hasn't been picked up already, and you're one of those people trying to figure out what's going to happen with the position throughout the week, this is one of the guys that you could use to pick up if you need to replace one of your tight ends. So that's going to be for San Francisco. Jordan Reed is a start. For the Rams, Higbee and Everett, I just can't get on board with either of them right now. You've got so much volume going out to Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. They're trying to run the ball still. There just hasn't been a defined role for Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett in terms of what they do as pass catchers, and because of that, I just can't buy into either of them on a weekly basis. I mentioned it on the wide receiver video, but for New Orleans, if your name is not Michael Thomas or Alvin Kamara, your fantasy value has tanked, and that includes Jared Cook. I just can't get on board with starting him anytime soon. Taysom Hill is just not that type of a quarterback. 3 guys with double-digit rushing attempts last week tells me that this is where New Orleans is heading with the offense, and they can do that against Denver. This is not a team that I feel like they're probably going to have to throw the ball an awful lot. They can control the ball on the ground, score some touchdowns on the ground, and really be able to put the game away in that capacity. For Denver, though, Noah Fant, I am going to go back to him as a start. Again, same thing with a lot of the tight ends. Inconsistency, right? And that's what we've seen from Noah Fant all year long. He still gets a decent amount of volume. And if you watch the tight end start sit episode last week, or the rankings episode, actually, which one it was, I kind of broke down what has my strategy become for tight ends this year. And I really tried to simplify it. And Noah Fant kind of falls into that simplicity. Yeah, the results haven't been there, but the volume continues to be coming his way. It's only a matter of time before the guy starts to break out again. For Kansas City and Tampa Bay, obviously we're starting Travis Kelce, right? We might as well just call him the Travis Kelce Chiefs if we want to, or the Patrick Mahomes Chiefs, or Tyreek Hill's Chiefs. It's those 3 guys. Travis Kelce, 100%, we're starting him. Tampa Bay is where things get a little bit murkier, though. Okay, I had Rob Gronkowski listed as a start last week, and I left him there, although I was concerned about it. Basically the same thing this week. I'm going to list him as a start. he's going to be much lower in my rankings. He did still get 6 targets, though. But the thing about Rob Gronkowski is he's going to have to score. And that's like a lot of tight ends in this league. Okay? It's the same thing. If you score, great. You're basically in there. If you don't, that becomes an issue. But I'm going to give Rob Gronkowski another week to kind of see what the game plan is. If the game plan continues to be AB, Godwin, and Evans, and those are where all of the targets are filtering to, Rob Gronkowski is basically going to become a sit whether there's unless there's some type of an injury, because at this point, there's just not enough volume, and praying for a touchdown every single week, I think you can pray for better options on other teams. Chicago and Green Bay has a couple of tight ends that helped save some fantasy teams earlier in the season with Jimmy Graham and Robert Tonyan, but at this point, they've become guys that we really can't rely on. Now, the good thing is we saw a little bit of life from Robert Tonyan this week. However, I'm not going to bank on that every single week either. So this week, going up against Chicago, I'm going to list him as a sit. I'm also going to list Jimmy Graham as a sit. The main reason Graham is a sit is because we don't know what's going on at the quarterback position right now. I'm recording these videos much earlier in the week than I normally do because we're trying to get them out quicker so we can get them out before the Thursday day games. Normally we're dropping some of these videos on Thursday during the day leading up to Thursday night. Can't do that this week. We got to get them out earlier. So that's part of the reason I'm still a little bit hesitant on Jimmy Graham. For Robert Tonyan, we will see what happens here. Okay, this has the makings of a you score, you're in type of game for Robert Tonyan. But again, kind of like I said with Robert Gronkowski or Rob Gronkowski, who calls him Robert? No one ever does that. Maybe his parents, I don't know. But same thing with Gronkowski. You play him, you wish for a tight end. But I would rather play a guy like Jordan Reed over Robert Tonyan right now. I would rather, you play your tight end, you have to hope for a TD every single time. You have to look at that point, who has the highest chances of TDs every single week. And even though Tonyan's coming off of a game with one, I just don't see it being a consistent play every week. My man Dallas Goedert last week, he went off. And yes, I know I'm not pronouncing it correctly. We're fancy around here, so it's pronounced Goedert. Anyway, great game for him last week. A lot of fantasy owners needed it. He was able to provide that output for you. On the flip side, though, for Seattle, this is where things are a little bit interesting because Will Dissly is close to being a start for me again. Not quite yet. I gotta wait and see it. But with no Greg Olsen possibly for the rest of the season, I'm going to be all in on Will Dissly being a guy that's going to have tight end one upside every single week the rest of the year. Not the tight end one, just top 12 at the position. And you can't find too many of those right now. So if he's still out there and available for you and you have some space, I wouldn't mind adding Will Dissly because if he takes some of that volume that Greg Olsen was seeing and adds it to his, he's definitely a guy with some decent upside every single week. There you have it, Headliner Nation, my start and set analysis for tight ends here in Week 12. Do me a favor, down below, hit that like button and leave a comment if you have any questions about anybody at the position this week. And as always, if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, hit that subscribe button, become a part of Headliner Nation today. Everybody, for Thanksgiving, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.